Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I prepared another short list video for all of you. We're going to be looking at 10 unique comic book omnibus editions. That's right, I've been looking through my omnibus library recently and I think that some are just a little bit different than others. To that end, I thought I'd just showcase a couple of my favorite selections here that I just think are really stand out or different from a lot of other omnibuses. Before we dive into today's collections though, I do want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, omnibuses for example, I would encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's omnibus list video. First up, in no particular order, we're going to be looking at the 52 Omnibus from DC Comics. I had the pleasure of reading and reviewing this a couple months ago on the channel, and it is certainly a blast. To me, though, what makes this collection so unique is that, yes, it includes 52 issues, and the story is set across 52 weeks, one full calendar year. Each issue takes place during that week, so issue 1 is week 1 in that year, all the way through issue 52, which is the final week of the year. And what's cool is that this was actually a weekly title released by DC Comics for a full calendar year, you guessed it. I think this novelty, more than anything else, makes this such a unique collection, and at 52 issues, it's a pretty hefty one at that. For those that maybe don't know anything about the storyline or what this series is really about, it's kind of in the aftermath of the Infinite Crisis event, which is my personal favorite DC Comics event I've had the pleasure of reading. However, do you need to read that event or that omnibus before picking up 52? I'm going to say not necessarily. Yes, it does help, but I think the biggest cliff notes are this is a year where the top 3 superheroes in the DC universe, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, are all really not on the scene. It's the DC universe without those main heroes, and 52 really explores the kind of second tier or tertiary characters in this universe who they elevate and give the spotlight to. 52 really follows a different cast of characters. Some notable appearances here are characters like Booster Gold, The Question, Renee Montoya, we have Steel, we have Starfire, Animal Man, some of these characters. We do have Black Adam on the scene as well, playing a really decisive role in this collection. But overall, I think this is a really fun event. Essentially, there's a kind of ongoing series of plot threads. There's a little bit of conspiracy, and basically we have a lot of these different storylines all throughout, weaving and crossing over each other, and ultimately everything does culminate into one big event climax. And I think overall this event really does pay off. Were there some slow periods in this book? Yeah, probably, but I think that that's fair with a book this size. Overall, it was a really riveting ride, and I think with just this amazing eclectic cast of characters, there is a little bit of something for everyone. I will say I did have my favorite characters or main characters in this book that whenever their storylines popped up, I was maybe a little bit more excited, but I was also very excited for some of the plot threads or characters I really, at the beginning, didn't really care too much about, didn't know much about, that by the end ended up being some of my favorite leading characters as well. I do think it's a really fun ride. This is a huge collaborative effort as well. We have some great writers attached to this book. To name a few that I really enjoyed, Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, but overall the experience is relatively seamless. I think the way it juggles so many different plots and stuff is absolutely commendable, and this is just a really unique ride. There are very few series that do this kind of weekly model. I think Batman Eternal is another one, but I do think that this is a standout omnibus, and I would recommend it to a lot of DC fans out there. The next omnibus we're going to be talking about today is the Batman Black and White Omnibus, also another DC omnibus. This is a really fascinating collection that I was also able to read through and review on the channel for those interested. Essentially, this is it's not a collage, it's a very collaborative effort. We have borderline hundreds of different creators attached to this book. There's basically a series of, 3 to 5 page storylines, give or take, and there's there's usually writers and different illustrators attached to that, and after 5 pages or so, it shuffles to the next story. And essentially we have a ton of these Batman universe short stories or vignettes, and they're all from these different creators. Some of them play really fast and loose with the mythology, some are playing it really straight-laced. We have really animated, cartoony styles, we have really grim, gritty styles, we have photorealistic looking stuff like Alex Ross. We have so many different styles here, and I think it really attracted a lot of the industry's top professionals. It really is, at first and foremost, an art book. I think that this is a brilliant book for those who love comic book artists. I think for fans of the Batman as well, there are so many great little stories here. Honestly, the opening story in this omnibus is actually one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. I went into it a little bit on the review of this book, so I'll save you all here, but suffice it to say, the quality of stories in this omnibus I would think is surprisingly good given how many stories there are. Some hit more than others, some I wasn't a fan of, but overall, this is a really solid collection. I also think this is a perfect omnibus that is maybe not a binge read kind of situation, but is a fantastic pick it up off the shelf, read a story or two, or return to one of your favorites and put it back on the shelf. I think if you do it like that, this easily could last you a good long time, and there's always more around the corner. I think that this was a really fascinating book. Yes, everything is just in black and white. I believe there's maybe one story that has a dash of red as well. Won't spoil that too much, but that's another fascinating use in the book. Other than that, it's all pretty much black and white. I do think that this collection is one that a lot of people are sleeping on or maybe not going into, possibly preferring more ongoing titles or longer storied epics, but I think that there is a cross-section of people that are comic book fans who like Batman and comic book artists that maybe haven't heard of this collection or haven't really investigated it, but it is a really beautiful omnibus, really well put together, and like I said, the style choices we get amongst the stories here, it is just really staggering. I easily do not have an omnibus like this. I doubt I'll ever encounter one quite like it. It is a truly unique collection, and I think for omnibus fans out there, it's one to consider. If you do want more information on this, of course you can check out my review just focusing on this book, but with this unique omnibus list, I had to include it in the selection. I think it's worthwhile. And hey, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I just want to invite you to do so. I'm always doing comic book list videos like this, unboxing, comic book reviews, live streams, and more. Thank you so much for considering. Now on with the show. Okay, next up we have a Marvel Omnibus. This is the Gwenpool Omnibus from Marvel Comics. I really think that this is a fascinating book for a few reasons. I think first and foremost, Gwenpool is a character that, similar to Deadpool or She-Hulk, can break the fourth wall, directly addressing the audience. But I think what's more interesting than that is how that character develops. Essentially, it is a character that is from more or less our world, the real world, who is then put into the world of the Marvel Universe, the comic universe. So she has all the details about the Marvel Universe, being a huge fan, and so that really allows her to break the fourth wall and circumvent a lot of just regular Marvel storytelling, because she has all this kind of forbidden knowledge. The art is also super unique as well. I think that for most of the art in this collection, there is kind of a manga-inspired influence. At least that's how I feel seeing the incredible artwork here displayed. What I really like too is that Gwenpool feels a bit off the beaten path. Yes, she's surrounded constantly by some of the mainstay Marvel heroes and villains, and yet she feels very outside of it. Also, like a lot of great humor comics, there's so much just good satire and poking fun at the universe in question, and I think it really works. I think that this is such an interesting hit for me too. They really make this character so sympathetic and much more layered than you would expect. I would say it's in a similar category to a well-written Deadpool arc, but with its own unique spins. How they also mature the character of Gwenpool and give her maybe more abilities, I won't go into too many spoilers, also makes this a real standout. Unique as well about this character in this omnibus is that this character got her start actually on a variant cover. This is at a time where they were doing so many different Gwen Stacy variant covers, after the success of Ghost Spider, Spider-Gwen. So many of these other titles were riffing on that idea, so we had Gwenified version of so many characters, and someone created created Gwenpool, which was sort of a Gwen Stacy Deadpool hybrid, and it was only meant to be a variant cover, but it got so popular and people were cosplaying as her at conventions, things like that, that there became a demand to actually make something with this character. I believe she actually debuted in comic in Howard the Duck from Chip Zdarsky, which I also enjoyed, before spinning out into her own special and ongoing series, and all of that is collected in this one omnibus. But I think that that's also a very unique start to a character, that you had her show up on a variant cover and then developed a series for her after that fact. I think for that reason, more than maybe any others, I do think Gwenpool is a really unique character, and that makes this a very unique omnibus. This is also a real hidden gem that I don't think a lot of people talk about. I think that some people maybe see the title and think it's just going to be a horrible Deadpool clone, and I like Deadpool, but Deadpool's his own thing. Do we need another one? I don't think so. And frankly, Gwenpool is not Deadpool. She is so unique, and how the narrative is styled is also very unique, and I think there's something here that is really solid for a lot of comic fans that maybe haven't found her title yet. Anyway, had to include it on this omnibus list, and now let's keep going. Okay, moving right along with another Marvel Omnibus. This time I'm talking about the Star Wars by Jason Aaron Omnibus. And why I think this is a unique collection is more personal. Why this is a unique collection for me is that this is the first real omnibus collection that I'm aware of that I've read that was like a licensed property outside of the Marvel Universe, at least initially. Star Wars obviously started as a film franchise with Lucasfilm. Marvel licensed the comic book rights, of course, a long time ago, and now Disney owns Star Wars, which owns Marvel, and it's all together now. But this is really the first licensed kind of other intellectual property that started in a different medium that I had read in the form of a comic in any great degree, especially in an omnibus format. So that's why it's unique to me. This isn't a comic series that got started in comics alone. No, it started on the big screen. It started in a whole different medium, and this is kind of in some ways adaptation, in some ways taking that universe and applying more to it. But I think that was just really successful here. Jason Aaron is one of my favorite comic book writers, and seeing him through the lens of Star Wars was really impressive because I think for me it almost made Jason Aaron disappear, and I mean that in a really good way. When I read his run on Star Wars, it feels like I'm just reading these kind of deleted scenes or missing histories of these characters. All the issues in this omnibus take place between the events of New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, episode 4 and 5 of the films, and it really does feel like the same voice of these characters. It really feels like a distinct time and place in the Star Wars universe, and I think that even the character models we get from the artists are in general very, very authentic and feel like the characters. And I cannot overstate enough how much this feels like the Star Wars movies. I mean that in the best way possible. To me, this doesn't read as fan fiction. This reads, like I said, like missing chapters we never got to see on the big screen, but absolutely could have, especially if Star Wars spun out into a mini-series back in the early 80s, late 70s. But I really mean that in a complimentary fashion, and that's for me why this is so unique. It's obviously not set in the main Marvel universe. It's set in a galaxy far, far away. But it just works so well, and I do think that for a licensed property like Star Wars, I was just really impressed how well it translated to comic books. I know there are several other runs of Star Wars comics that are now considered legends or non-canon, whatever that means anymore, but this is really fun. This is really fun, and this is really Disney's first time at bat once they owned Lucasfilm, so this is kind of like the first, I think, canon Star Wars comic that we've had recently. I might say recently, maybe a decade or so now. Anyway, this is just a really good run. I did review this in full on the channel as well, but really a stellar collection, and I absolutely recommend it for something a bit unique, especially if you're used to reading just superhero comics. I definitely recommend Star Wars by Jason Aaron. Okay, and last but certainly not least, we're going to be talking about X-Men Grand Design by the late Ed Piskor. Unfortunately, we lost Ed this last year. I was not familiar with a lot of his work outside of X-Men Grand Design, but I was really floored by this collection, and it's easily one of the most unique collections in my library. As you can see almost immediately, there is a distinct look and feel to this book. It is my only omnibus, I believe, that's kind of a matte matte, more newspaper, cardboardy kind of feeling paper. Cardboard might not be a good example, but it's much more of a matte textured kind of paper, not really a glossy paper, but it's still a very thick stock, very archival feel still. It's still very, very prestige edition, but it's made intentionally to look aged or kind of browned a little bit, like you find kind of like old comics in a newspaper at like a garage sale is kind of the feel of the book. And I like that. There's not a lot of straight up white space. It's all kind of dirtied in a way, but it gives it a kind of texture and a kind of weird authenticity or feel to it. And I think one of the things that really shines in this collection is just how big of a fan Pisker is of the X-Men. He even says in the beginning that this is the love letter to the X-Men. And for those that don't know, X-Men Grand Design is essentially a retelling of the X-Men mythos at the beginning of X-Men all the way through, I don't know, maybe the Jim Lee era, roughly, give or take a bit, but it's like a huge swatch of decades of X-Men storytelling condensed into just a few short issues. The art is really, really unique as well. It's Pisker's style, which I've always thought is kind of like graphic, or I mean crude in the best way, like a stylized, crude look to it. Like, there's not a lot of polish to his artwork, and yet it's so immediately distinctive and captivating, and it really just sells X-Men to me. We really get a lot of storytelling, like I said, when they first debuted in, I think, the 60s, all the way through, I don't know, the 90s probably in here, and it is a pretty faithful retelling. It's kind of like the Cliff Notes version. If you want to catch up on all these books without reading and tracking down the actual issues, you can get a lot of the mythology of X-Men by reading X-Men Grand Design, and it's all handled very, very lovingly. There's also a couple story bits at the very end that kind of give you maybe the reason for why it's being told this way. We have kind of a frame narrative with the Watcher, which I thought was very cool, and there is a little bit of tweaks at the end. Like I said, it makes it feel like its own story, even as much as it's a retelling, which I thought was really fascinating. This omnibus also includes a couple more aged-looking versions of a couple key issues, like the giant-size X-Men and a few others, and then the whole back of the book is actually just kind of outline scripts, behind-the-scenes making of for X-Men Grand Design. Honestly, this is such a unique collection between the matte paperwork, what the story really is, and that half the omnibus is basically a kind of outline or kind of draft version of the book. It's just really fascinating, and I think for people that like to see how books are made, this is a spectacular omnibus. Okay, and with that, we're actually already going to wrap up this list for today. 5 unique comic book omnibus editions. I think with so many incredible books getting the omnibus treatment recently, I thought this would be a fun way to showcase some I feel like just are really standout or different. These are not necessarily my favorite runs or favorite omnibuses, but ones I feel like really pop in a sea of other omnibuses. But I'm sure I've missed some other very unique collections, and I'd like to hear some recommendations in the comments. If you're an omnibus fan or collector, what is an omnibus you think is something very different or something that's just a standout to you, and why? I'd love to hear all that in the comments. What do you think would make a good omnibus that maybe hasn't hit in print yet? I'd love to hear that as well. But at any rate, thank you all so much for watching and stopping by. It means the world to me. I always love engaging with all of you guys. Thank you for watching this content, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, that comment we talked about, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks, and have a good one.